I'm Chris Farrell, and this is On Watch. Welcome to On Watch, everybody, the Judicial Watch podcast, where we go behind the headlines to cover news and information the mainstream media, the old legacy media, really doesn't want you to know about, where we try to recover some lost history and explain the inexplicable. Today we're going to do the third. We're going to explain the inexplicable, and joining us to do that is my friend and a former guest on this show, Peter Mcilvenna. Peter is the host of the Hearts of Oak podcast, which all of you should subscribe to and listen to faithfully. He also happens to be the chief of staff to Lord Pearson in the House of Lords. Peter, welcome to On Watch.
Chris, it's great to be with you. Thank you for the invite.
So, Elon Musk turned the attention of the world, or at least the attention of ex-subscribers around the world, to really a scandal, an outrageous problem in the UK that really is an old problem. You and I talked about this literally years ago in a private conversation, but it's something that the British public have known about since like 2012 or so. But all of a sudden, everyone's paying attention to and suddenly really motivated by the stories of these grooming gangs, these rape gangs that exist in the UK. Can you start us out with a big kind of high-level overview, and then we can talk about some particular stuff. What has been going on for more than a decade in the UK with these gangs?
Well, it's been a crazy week, and we're only 1 week in, and President Trump isn't even in the White House yet, hasn't had the inauguration, and yet Elon Musk has decided from the 1st of January to highlight this issue. First of all, he posted Free Tommy Robinson, who's one of the probably the most recognizable figures in the UK, is liked and loathed. And then he started focusing on what we've known as the grooming gangs, and it's non-stop. He's maybe posted maybe 15 times a day. And he's not letting up on this. And he's going to war against the British government, Keir Starmer,
right,
and focusing on all of that. But stepping back a little bit, what this is, and I've talked to different US audiences, but it's generally we have had since, and this was first reported in 1975. That's the first report I've seen of it in a newspaper up in Rotherham, which is a kind of middle North England, up in Yorkshire. And it was around this issue, which we now know as grooming gangs, which is in effect Muslim Pakistani gangs raping white English girls. That's what it is, and it's gone on for that length of time, for 50 plus years. This first came to light in the UK. Well, it was a journalist in 2007, Julie Bindel, wrote about this in the Times, the Sunday Times, and then Andrew Norfolk wrote about this in 2012. And in 2012 was the front page of the Times newspaper, and that's the first time I came aware of this, so 14 years ago. And this was a story that he had uncovered that was hundreds he talked about. It later transcribed thousands and thousands per city, that these are girls who were being basically trafficked, passed around, families, groups, communities, Muslim Pakistani communities, by and large, in 93%. So we've had a report talking about 85% of the perpetrators are Pakistani. That was a Quilliam report. And then later on, someone who wrote the book on this, Easy Meat, talked about 93% of the perpetrators were Muslim Pakistani. And this has gone on. It has been talked about, but it's more or less gone on under the radar because, and I quote, "we don't want a race riot." There have been at least 2, if not 3 quotes from police officers saying that's why they don't want to investigate this, because of a race riot. And you put your finger on Islam and the incompatibility that Islam often has with our Western freedoms, and you don't come out very well. Just look at the leader in the Netherlands, Geert Wilders, who lives under police guard and I think doesn't stay in the same place for more than 2 nights ever, because he has gone up and critiqued Islam, which turns out not to be so peaceful as we are told. But this has gone on 50 years.
Let me just pause there for a second, because there's some fascinating things that come out of that kind of high-level summary. Number one is that there are thousands of girls who've been subjected to this kind of abuse, this kind of, I guess grooming is one word to use, but it seems inadequate when it comes to the exploitation of these young girls. Even the psychological manipulation, let alone the violent sexual acts against them and the way that they're trafficked and passed around. I guess one question is, how do thousands of girls, how are they subjected to this and no one seems to notice? Or they notice sort of belatedly and go, oh, gee, you know, a few girls in the community, a few girls in the county, a few girls in the city. It's not a few, it's now like tens, dozens, hundreds. What does that say about what's going on in British families? I mean, obviously, my guess is these girls are on the margin, right? They're either financially, socially, economically, perhaps even emotionally or mentally, they may have some other issue that makes them a vulnerable population that these Pakistani Islamists then exploit, right? I mean, so there's a personal issue with the girls, there's a family issue that the girls are in this environment where these guys get away with it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, let me pick on 2 specific areas on that. Now, the numbers are, in one area, Rotherham, one town, 1,400 was the figure put out by the newspapers. Campaigners have talked about 1,900 girls at least are in one town. This is one town of at least 40 that we've had trials happening across the UK. Lord Pearson was chuffed and intrigued when he was reposted by Elon Musk after talking about in a speech 6 years ago in 2018 in the House of Lords, and he talked about, if you extrapolate that, you're looking at 250,000 girls. You've got the Labour MP in the area, Sarah Champion in Rotherham, who, even though she's on the left in Labour, she has done sterling work on this. She has been a voice for the voiceless, and she talks about up to 1 million girls have been affected by this in an interview in the Daily Mirror British newspaper a couple of years ago. But so you've got these are often girls from maybe more disadvantaged families. You have sometimes, often, it's from those within care homes, so children who are in and out of care. You've also got maybe in communities that are maybe more working class communities. So you've got that, and that's
when
why.
When you say care, you're talking about some kind of foster situation or an orphanage or they're placed in a because of social service issues, child protective issues, they're placed someplace else other than their biological home of origin. Is that when you say care, that's what you mean?
So all of those, you've got child services are involved with families because of issues that are happening. So local government are involved in trying to help with safeguarding issues. And then you've got actually some of those girls actually in homes because they've been removed from families because of different issues. And then you've also got just more working class areas where it is a struggle to survive that have been left behind. Basically, it's the same story in the US, communities that have been left behind.
Right.
And often those communities were, in effect, often the Brexit communities, those who voted for Brexit, communities that were left behind, that didn't have a voice. And during the Brexit debate, they were able to speak up. So you've got all those pieces fitting together, child services involved, actual care homes and disadvantaged communities. And And I think the media, we have a class system in the UK. And I didn't realize until I started working with Lord Pearson, the divisions we have in British society, especially English society, in terms of the class system. And I think the media and the politicians, they looked down on these communities and these girls. They didn't see them as actually the same as them, as important as them, and therefore they were ignored communities. So you've got that on one side. The other side is the Pakistani Muslim communities are closed communities. 100% closed, ghetto communities. We have a lack of integration. Multiculturalism has failed spectacularly in the UK, where we have many different communities living as ghettos, as silos, side by side, with zero integration. And I see this where I live in London. You can go to different parts of London, and you know that's the Polish community, or the Somali community, or the French, or the Saudi Arabian, and you have these divides happening within our society. And sadly, we have a community with the Pakistani community and Muslim community larger that don't trust society and that are separate. They have their own separate legal system within Sharia courts, their own separate food system in halal, mosques, so they congregate around mosques, and often they have their own educational system, and that means that makes them very separate. And the issue is we have allowed that to happen, but that has made people vulnerable because it cuts them off from society, it cuts them off from the police, it cuts them off from the legal system, it cuts them off from child services. And this has been allowed to happen because those communities have been hidden away, have been cut off. And in those communities, you often have women, most of them do not work because they're not allowed to work. They're not allowed to participate in society. When they do go out, they're covered head to foot, so they're not visible. And you've got that separation. And because of that separation, because of that hidden, because of actually many of these women don't speak English. And they wouldn't know how to contact the police if there is a problem. And they would be fearful of their community if they contacted the police. Therefore, they hide away and don't know where to go for help. Or maybe even they see this as normal, as part of their culture, their community, because women are second-class citizens often in Islamic communities and Middle Eastern cultures. So that's where we are at the moment. You've got the white English girls themselves being targeted from disadvantaged communities, and you've got the communities where this is happening. The people know it's happening. Families and communities know. They keep quiet because you wouldn't want to snitch. You wouldn't want to go to the police if one of your neighbours are doing something wrong. So yeah, it's a very different understanding to, as I say, if I see something happening, well, we need to tell local authority, we need to tell the police because that's wrong, because child protection, because safeguarding, that does not exist in a lot of these Muslim Middle Eastern communities. That is not there.
So we've got these predators who are out exploiting these girls, and you know the way to get to them, or the way to create these relationships that allows them to exploit, and this is where the word grooming comes in. They develop these relationships. They then create a dependency or create some kind of a relationship that can be exploited, and that moves from friendship to maybe drugs and alcohol to perhaps casual sex. They think that they're really loved by whoever it is in this relationship, and then it's quickly moved over to this really sick exploitation where these girls are basically, they're captive one way or the other. They're captive. We can talk about the perpetrators, the creeps who are doing this, and their twisted ideology in a moment, and you can kind of fill in the blanks. If you can draw your own conclusions very quickly about that. What I'm curious about, and I think what we're seeing the attention called to now, is that you've got police, you've got government leaders at the municipal, county, and now national level who seem to have deliberately, willfully turned a blind eye because, as you mentioned, they're afraid of a race war or some type of being, called names, that they're anti-Islamic, or they're anti-Pakistani, or they're racist. And they're so afraid of offending anybody or creating any kind of tension that they're literally willing to trade these girls' lives because they don't want to have any sort of fuss or embarrassment. Is that a legitimate explanation?
Oh, 100%. And there are two words that are utterly dangerous in the English language and shut down debate. In the UK, certainly, the term racism or racist and the term Islamophobic.
Right.
And those two terms shut down debate and make you go away, and therefore whatever is happening continues. And I remember when we started Hearts of Oak back in 2020, my co-founder Alan and I went up to Rotherham and we spent time with Elizabeth, who is in the middle of illegal action to get money from her rapist, who's already been sentenced and charged and been in jail. So she is suing her rapist, the first of its kind, actually. It never happened in the UK before, and we're nearing the end of that journey. But we went up with her to Rotherham and we drove around, and she took us around the areas to point out the institutions that had failed her. She talked about the police. We talked to her father. Her father was threatened with arrest because he went to the police to talk about, to complain that his girl had been held captive. So he went to the police. They told him to go away. Went to the police again. They said, go away. You're stirring up tensions. Stop it. So he went outside and started banging the door off the flat. Banging. He knew his girl was in there. The police arrived and they put him in the car and they said, if you continue this, we will have to arrest you because you're stirring up tensions. It's disorder. He said, I can't. So they let him go. He went and banged on. Within 5 minutes, a police van had turned up. They put him in the van. They took him to the station and they told him he was being arrested. They didn't care that actually the girls were being held there. And that was South Yorkshire Police that had been investigated numerous times, but not a single police officer has been arrested for turning a blind eye. Or other police officers, when parents went to them, they then told the parents that their children had made a lifestyle choice, that they had decided they wanted to be prostitutes at 13, 14, and that was their lifestyle and it was nothing to do with the police. How can a child agree to any sexual contact or sexual engagement? They're a child. That is illegal. It is the adult that's committing the offence, and the child is never at fault, whatever happens. And yet the police were making the child feel as though they were guilty for this.
I've seen stories where even, and this is obviously highly questionable, they've even said, well, she's now 16, so that's the age of consent and she can do as she pleases. But in reality, this girl was picked up when she was 14, and she's had 2 years of psychological conditioning, 2 years of this sick rape culture. And so now maybe she's 16, but she's not a 16-year-old making a decision, with free will and intellect. This is a 16-year-old who's been abused for years. And so, even that's a disingenuous sort of excuse by the police. And, you said that, I guess, the Yorkshire police were investigating these things and had claims made and had done investigations. So there's no one has been able to determine what police official made the decision and issued the policy statement saying we will not enforce complaints or investigate these actions. No one can point and say, well, Chief Inspector so-and-so said you will not do this. There's no accountability?
There is zero accountability. We have South Yorkshire Police and Greater Manchester Police, another hub of this,
right,
just slightly to the north. They've both been in special measures for a while with investigations because of utter failure. But not one single police officer has lost his job or been arrested and charged with their offence. And it goes further, Chris. It goes to the point, this is numerous upon numerous cases, even the last year it's come out, about the police losing evidence. So one case, a police officer, the police brought in a girl, interviewed her, and then interviewed her again a month later, and then interviewed her twice 4 months later, So 6 months of interrogations, in effect, of these girls. And then after 6 months, this girl was told, no, it's not true. The men have denied it ever happened. You must have swapped your clothing with someone else who they slept with so you could give DNA evidence. Therefore, it's nonsense, and the men are not prosecuted. Other times we've had numerous times we've had police interviewing these girls, interviewing them time and time again, and then at the end saying, we've lost the interview footage. We don't have it. So if you want to, you can go through this whole process of being interrogated once again. At what point do you have a girl that comes to you and you accept her story and then let her tell her story and see where that goes? But it seems like you've got a vulnerable girl going to a police officer, saying what has happened, then being interrogated, interviewed, questioned as if she has done something wrong, and then they just lose the evidence. How do you lose this evidence time and time again? So the systematic failures have been across the board, not only with South Yorkshire, Greater Manchester Police, and we have 43 police forces across the UK of the regions. But this has happened. 40 towns have had these trials, 70 different trials, 420 individuals have been charged and sentenced. So we have had some level of justice in terms of individuals put away. But the sentencing, in terms of looking at the police and the judicial system, I know the girl that Elizabeth, we are looking at her getting financial recompense from her perpetrator. So we will take his property and sell it and give her the money. But even at that point, this is a 4.5-year fight. This goes, she has to raise the money, tens of thousands of pounds, if she wants to engage in this legal issue. So the whole system is stacked against these girls. And the judicial system seems to only exist to make money. It doesn't seem to be about justice or truth. It seems to be about lining the pockets of these, of the lawyers, of the legal profession. And when a girl who's been through this decides to enter in and actually, I want financial recompense, they have to pay the money, they have to pay court fees, they have to go through the process. And many of their perpetrators, with Elizabeth, her perpetrator, when he was charged, I think 7 years was his sentence. He was out after 3.5 for 2 counts of rape with a minor, 3.5 years. We have people in jail for longer for Facebook posts in the UK than we have of child rape. So the whole understanding of women and sexual crime, it needs to be readdressed, and no one really is having this conversation in the UK, despite the fact that even today there is a debate in Parliament on this very issue, with the Labour government saying we refuse to back an independent inquiry. So this is huge with so many different aspects. Chris, you're right, the local authorities, child services, the police, across the board, they have failed these girls time and time again, and no one has been punished for that. Yeah,
you mentioned the debate in Parliament today. I was watching a few clips. Your illustrious Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, was very busy being a lawyer and not being very much of a leader, in my opinion. And he offered up all the usual ridiculous, I'm not an attorney, praise the Lord. But, you know, he offered up the typical sophistry and lawyerly BS when confronted with the challenge to have a national investigation. And what he said, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, I don't have, exact memory of what he said, but essentially he said, well, the last investigation took 7 years, and so if we investigate anything, it'll be another 7 years and you won't get any justice. I mean, what an obvious lie. What a pathetic individual he is. I know that the UK is now more like East Germany than ever before. I don't want you going to jail for saying something or offering some idea that is now verboten in the UK. But perhaps you're allowed to criticize Mr. Starmer. I don't know if that's permitted anymore But
oh, please let me, Chris. Please.
Because it's true, like you said, there's people sitting in jail for posting a meme that was too sarcastic or too cutting or too critical. And so I'm imagining if you were to criticize your prime minister, you know, the Ministerium for Staatssicherheit would come knocking at the door and drag you away. So, but anyway, very interesting exchange with the prime minister in Parliament today. And he's really a coward. He's like a scared little bunny. You know, Elon Musk called him out, and now anybody that questions him is supposedly some kind of a fascist stormtrooper or something. Give us a sense of what happened in Parliament today.
So there was a bill going through. This is strange things that have come together. So there's a bill going through because we had a girl that was murdered by her father, Muslim girl. She was murdered by her father. They homeschooled her, and that meant she had no access to the world. So they abused her and killed her. Horrendous story. And the government, governments, why let a crisis go to waste? So they're using that to tighten down on homeschooling, which anyway doesn't really happen in the UK. They want to make it so the government doesn't automatically give you the right to homeschool your child. That's what they're moving towards. Very dangerous, massive government overreach, instead of focusing on the problem, which is in Muslim communities, how girls maybe are treated and brought up. Instead of focusing on that, they say, no, we're going to anyone who from Northern Ireland, from Britain, who raises their children, hey, you don't automatically have the right to homeschool your child. Well, it's my child, not your child.
Right.
But that takes away parental rights. So we've had this battle. So this bill was being debated today about beginning the steps to remove those automatic rights for parents. And the Conservative Party, the Conservative in name only, let me say that, the Chino, they had been in power for 14 years. We've obviously got a new leader of the Conservative Party. We've been through many of them, from David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, the list goes on. And they all had different levels of inquiries. They had a independent inquiry. It wasn't no grooming gangs. It was a 7-year inquiry, cost £200 million, started by originally Theresa May, who was the Prime Minister for a while. £200 million, and not one of its recommendations has been implemented. In fact, you have the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, who I actually have a lot of respect for because she's speaking the right language. She's a strong Christian, Nigerian origin, speaks truth, and seems to be someone who wants to do good. So I'm giving her a lot of leeway, a lot of time to see what happens. But she was a government minister for children and families, I think from 2022 to 2024. She never talked this language about her concern of the grooming gangs and what they were doing to children. She was in government. She was a minister. She had position of power. And yet I don't think, I'm happily be corrected, but I've looked through and I don't think she ever addressed this issue. Now she's addressing this issue because it's political, because she is no longer in government and the Labour Party are on the back foot, therefore she will hit them politically. This cannot be a political issue. This has to be a safeguarding, looking after those who are most vulnerable in society, our children.
She's talking a good line today in Parliament, challenging the Prime Minister face to face. So credit for that. But as you point out, when she was actually in the ministry running it, if you back up a couple of years ago, apparently there's no record of her stepping out forcefully on this issue while she actually had the portfolio to do so.
Exactly. Nothing at all. And she is now calling for independent inquiry into this, because the independent inquiry, the 7-year-old one, the one of many, but the only national, actually came about because of Jimmy Savile, who was a BBC journalist who raped 200 girls, and that was covered up for 30 plus years, 40 years, by the BBC, our media outlet, and by the government. So when that came to light, there was huge investigations and there was an inquiry launched, but it was on the back of that, which was celebrities abusing girls. That is a very different situation to the grooming gangs that we faced. And that report, I think it only had a subsection on grooming gangs. That was not the focus. So the call today for an investigation into grooming gangs is a fair call, because that has never happened. And even the previous investigations, inquiries that focused on areas around this, they haven't had their recommendations implemented. So even what has been called before hasn't happened.
It's still inadequate.
So, yeah, completely inadequate.
And in Starmer's remark, this really annoyed me when he did it, because it was the typical phony lawyerly garbage, was, oh, we'd have to wait another 7 years. I mean, what a bunch of nonsense. What a dishonest way to address a very deadly, serious crisis in the country. And, you know, it's a systemic thing. What you're talking about is Pakistani Islamists in a number of different localities throughout the UK. And so it's not just a one-off in one place with one bad guy or one group of guys doing something. This is all over the country. This is not some, you know, sad circumstance given a bad situation. This is going on all over the place. And frankly, if it's going on all over the place in the UK, I have got to believe the exact same thing is going on here in the United States. And I haven't heard a peep. There's been no great coverage concerning grooming gangs in the United States that I'm aware of. I may be woefully ignorant. I may need to go educate myself on this and try to find some reporting on it. But this has really put the magnifying glass over this problem. You know, I want to get to a related question on all of this, because you started to bring in some of the political aspects of it. Elon Musk also pointed out or highlighted what appears to be his view or his satisfaction or dissatisfaction. You mentioned Tommy Robinson earlier, and there's also Nigel Farage. There seems to be another sort of, it's a tangent of the issue of grooming gangs, but I guess both Mr. Robinson and Mr. Farage, Elon Musk has opined on the two of them as well. And I wanted to get your opinion or your view on that controversy.
Well, this is huge, but just to touch on your last point, it can't be a UK issue. And the UK and Sweden especially have faced this issue. Sweden is lost, completely collapsed with other mass immigration and rape gangs all across the country. So Sweden is gone. The UK has more or less collapsed. It cannot be just those two countries. When you have mass immigration, open borders, you don't know who's coming in and what they bring in. So I agree, this is an issue that I think, and I'm praying that whenever President Trump is inaugurated, that the next 4 years, this can be an area that can be looked at of vulnerable girls and how they're treated within these communities, and make sure and shine a light on them. And certainly don't let them be Sharia courts.
And keep in mind, the Biden administration has lost accountability and track of 325,000 children, and that's a modest estimate. They've essentially been the official government sponsors of a trafficking operation where all these kids have vanished, and our Health and Human Services Department has an Office of Refugee Resettlement, and they have at least some data on these kids, but they're not sharing it. There's no enforcement. And I'm very certain that's at the top of President Trump's very long list of trying to recover these lost kids. So we've got another crisis. I mean, what you're facing is bad. What we're facing is horrific. There's a lot of work to be done to straighten this out.
Oh, there is. And I was sickened when I saw that 1/3 Of course, Kamala Harris was your border czar. You're getting a better border czar soon. So
yes,
let's
indeed.
pray that is different. But you touched on the Tommy Nigel, and they're two very different figures. I've known Tommy Robinson for 16 years. I've worked with Nigel, but don't know him well at all. And Tommy Robinson is a figure, an activist on the ground, and has spoken of the grooming gang issue certainly since 2009, 2010. They're very different figures. And this, I think this is a class issue. Tommy is a working class lad from a very rough town. Nigel is kind of middle class, well-heeled, public school. They're very different figures. And this fight, there didn't need to be this fight. That Nigel Farage, who doesn't want to be associated with Tommy because of what the media say about him, rightly or wrongly so, but he could have said, look, Tommy Robinson has done great work in highlighting these grooming gangs, but I don't want to be associated with him. He could have said that, and one of his MPs has said that. Rupert Lowe has said that, given Tommy credit, but created distance. Nigel should have done the same, and that would have stopped his battle with Elon Musk. Maybe meant he could have got some of that $100 million that was promised. But Nigel decided to go up against Tommy, and he really doesn't like Tommy. And maybe this is he doesn't want Tommy to get the spotlight. They're both high-profile figures. I mean, I've been with them both. I've walked around London with them both different times, and they get mobbed. They are celebrities, both of them.
Right.
But they're very different types of celebrities, and I worry the damage this will do to Nigel if he doesn't row back. He's not someone who normally rows back on things, pulls back and says, I got that wrong maybe. He's doubled down and tripled down, and that's not helped him. And Elon Musk cannot back both, because Nigel doesn't want to be associated with Tommy. But I hope and pray that Nigel can back off, and that doesn't seem to be a rift that needs to be there. But when Elon Musk said free Tommy Robinson on the first, I looked at my phone for a couple of minutes, and I thought I was still sleeping. I thought, I'm in a dream. This cannot be true. And then
Robinson is currently jailed for contempt of court. But what is the underlying offense that got him there?
Okay, well, I'm going to see Tommy on next week. I'm going to visit him in prison. I visit him in Belmarsh, a Category A prison. He's in Woodhill, a Category B prison. He's a Category D prisoner. You've got A, B, C, D, from highest dangerous prisoner down to low-level civil. Tommy is a Category D prisoner, and yet he's been in the Category A and B prison. Solitary confinement, 22 hours a day in a cell for possibly up to 18 months. You can imagine the damage that does to someone.
Sure.
It's not the sentence that's the punishment, it's the conditions that really are the punishment. So he is there for contempt of court. The contempt of court was showing a film. Now, if anyone can tell me that someone should go to jail for 18 months as a journalist for showing a film to show the failures of the legal system, then I can be proved wrong if anyone can tell me. But he showed this film after a legal case of which he was accused of libeling someone else, and he has put out this to show the failure of the judicial system in that silence. A film that's now been seen 120 million times because Elon Musk has highlighted it. It was 70 million before Elon highlighted this. Within a day, it was 90 million, and now it's up to 120 million. And this is an embarrassment on the British government. But Tommy should not be, and even Nigel, through gritted teeth, has said this, that Tommy should not actually be in solitary confinement. He is in a prison. The reason he's in solitary confinement, according to prison, is the prison he is in is 37% Muslim. We have 5% Muslim population. There's a discrepancy, which is a whole other issue that we'll leave for another time. But why put someone in one of the most Islamic prisons in the UK? It is known, as is Belmarsh, as a jihadi centre. And yet he is in there in solitary confinement so that for his own safety. But what about his own health? That is wrong. And
right.
To me, actually, you cannot have someone in solitary confinement for 9 months.
Yeah, and
that is wrong to the individual.
There's a Category D prison where he could be, I mean, we refer to it as a country club prison, basically, where they sit around doing arts and crafts and going for walks in the woods, but they're detained nonetheless.
Do you know, Chris, some of the rapists are in those prisons. the girl where our legal case, her perpetrator is in an open prison, the lowest level. So you've got the grooming gangers, the rapists, they're in the lowest level prisons, but Tommy Robinson, who showed a film, is in one of the highest level prisons. Work that out if you can.
And that's what I meant earlier when I took my swipe at our good friends and cousins in the UK, that you're acting like you're East Germany. I mean, a guy shows a movie and he goes to prison and is in solitary confinement. I mean, who was forced to watch the movie? No one, right? I mean, this is a mindset. And if you're going that way, you know, we could easily slide into that kind of sick thinking. Thank God we've just had an election that obviously points in the other direction, and we've just gotten rid of our equivalency of a Keir Starmer. But I don't, you know, I cannot fathom the stories and reportings I've seen in the UK about people being arrested for silently praying outside of an abortion facility. Or I saw another guy had his house, had 2 police officers and a psychiatric nurse show up because he posted on the internet that you know, the Christian church needs to stand up. Somehow that was viewed as a threat. It's really it's a very weird, twisted environment that you're in. So my heart goes out to you, and I know that there's a lot of folks here in the United States praying for a recovery of your country to what it once was.
Well, I'm hoping and praying that whenever President Trump, along with Musk and others, restores free speech, law and order, patriotism, borders back to the US, that maybe you will look across to your cousins across the water, the motherland, right. Because we do need some boldness. And I mean, Keir Starmer has even threatened to cut off diplomatic relations, to remove ourselves from the Five Eyes intelligence community if Elon Musk does not back down and apologize. This is like children. We are in a government run by children who have no clue. Good luck
if your Five Eyes access gets cut off. Good luck to you. That's quite entertaining. Yeah, it is childish. It's ridiculous. And, well, you know, there's always hope. And we will maintain that hope. Listen, as we close out, I just want you to give sort of an impact statement, sort of a, hey, Americans, wake up, of what it means that these grooming/rape gangs, and that's what they are. Grooming is a very delicate word for this kind of sexual exploitation. It's slavery in one regard, and it's really perverted, sick, sexual, violent abuse in another regard. But if this is going on all over the UK, and there's thousands of girls, what is the warning to the United States?
The warning, and we've seen the votes for President Trump coming from maybe places that weren't expected. You look along the Texan border and you see the huge Hispanic vote, the swing. You look up at Michigan and you see the Muslim vote. And it's come from different areas where people are just sick and tired of the Democrats destroying the country. My plea to Americans would be, up until some point, there was, and there is still the embers of that American dream, that coming together under one flag, that swearing allegiance to that flag. There is that integration and there is that understanding of where you are. You're one nation under God. We in the UK don't understand, there is no British dream. There is no one nation under the Union Jack. There are multi-nations that come together. And that to me is the huge issue and the lesson that maybe can be learned from the UK's trial of multiculturalism. And I know the US have tried to go down this line as well, but you've still got this anchor that holds America back, not only to a Christian ethos in the country, but to an understanding of what Americanism means, American exceptionalism. And I think if you can hold off and stop communities being ghettoized, and Actually, in the UK, it is the Muslim community, and I think in media you need to put this on the table and let's have a grown-up conversation. You're not critiquing individuals, you're just understanding how groups and ideologies fit together. But there is a separation there. As we have had in the UK for 30 years, we've had 75 Sharia courts happening all around the UK, and women are regarded as a half or a quarter in Islamic law, and that cannot be allowed to happen. You have to allow people freedom, but in the end of the day, you need to fit under to the laws within that country, and the rules and the societal norms. And I think if America rediscover what it means for American exceptionalism, that American dream, and I believe there is a huge chance, I'm excited at that happening under President Trump, then I think that actually America can have a bulwark against this, can protect themselves against this ghettoization, multiculturalism that will try and steal away from what brings Americans together. And if you can do that, if you can not let there to be separatism in terms of legal and food and education systems, that everyone comes together under the flag, under what it means to be an American, then you've got a chance of standing up and stopping this. That would be my hope and my prayer for the American.
Peter, thank you so much for joining us and for discussing a really difficult topic on a number of different levels. It's very, very challenging, very, very hard, and it leaves a scar, I think, on the public's consciousness. And we appreciate your knowledge of the topic, your sensitivity, and also really keen analysis of what's really at stake here. So thank you very much for joining us.
Hopefully next time it'll be on better news, Chris.
And where can folks follow your excellent work?
They can follow every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern. We stream on @Hearts of Oak UK on X and @Hearts of Oak everywhere else. We also stream on Steve Bannon's War Room on Rumble and Getter, so you can find us there. So Monday, Thursday, Saturday, 3 p.m.
That's fantastic. Peter Mcilvenna, the host of Hearts of Oak and Chief of Staff to Lord Pearson, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Chris Farrell, on Watch.